We're doing this. We're doing it live. Did you know the CDC came out with a mass study that was maybe not very good?
I don't read the CDC anymore.
You know?
CDC?
The George Floyd Act. Are you voting for it?
No.
You aren't voting for it?
No.
Oh, really?
No.
How about that? Okay. All right. I see how it is. An update on James Coates. He's in jail till May 3rd.
That's wrong.
That's
Free James
unbelievable.
Coates.
Exactly.
Free James Coates.
You should be mad.
Yeah.
My goodness. Welcome to the Sunday special. Pastor Toby Chuck Knox. I'm the water boy. Good to be with you guys.
I didn't even salute. You got me all mad with the James Coates thing.
Already? Yeah.
Why are they keeping him locked up? For what? How many people has he killed?
He's a bad guy.
No, he might be a danger
to society. To the health.
Wait until they find out that those folks still having church.
Yeah, right.
The church is still having church.
Yeah, right.
Praise God for y'all, by the way.
Yeah, amen. We had a
But free James Coates, man.
Can I finish the story? Can I finish the story?
It got me all mad.
Free James Coates.
We had a call with some of the Canadian pastors yesterday, and we asked them, said anybody died from the COVID in your church? And one pastor said no, but one died from the shutdown.
Yeah.
Because he got cancer and couldn't get treated.
So who's responsible for that?
Yeah.
What official are we going to go arrest and put in jail and have him stay there for a few months because he actually killed somebody?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? James Coates up here serving people, and they're going to, you better go on.
Hey, you guys need to download the app. We're having, iTunes is actually having a little problem right now with our feed.
So it's a great opportunity.
The best way to get us anyway is actually download the app.
Quite honestly, we don't really care about.
iTunes is gonna deplatform us, cancel us eventually. I was actually nervous emailing the customer service because
Apple hates Jesus.
Yeah,
and so we don't really care about Apple. That's why we started.
You want to go to war because we could go to war.
Yeah, we for real. That's how I feel like that, James Coates.
Knox is fired up about Coates.
Quick,
Coates.
What's the next thing? Quick.
Yeah. All right, subscribe to our magazine too. Does that help, Knox? Can I just go through this? He's going to interrupt me every time.
I'm gonna put my
this is Knox right now.
Locking up our brother preaching the gospel.
I got to hurry up on this one. DeafWire, go to deafwire.com for our news aggregator. You got anything to say about that, Knox?
Yeah, James Coates is now in general population. I got to say this because, hold on. He's in general population. They done messed up. I just want everybody to know out there.
They did done messed up.
They done put him in general population. Before he was quarantined. They had him separate from everybody. Now they going to have a gospel insurrection.
That's right. Insurrection.
People about to get saved up in the prison. Because they done put James Coates in the prison. So I just want y'all to know, if y'all want this to end, y'all better let the man out.
You guys remember what Jesus said when Saul was breathing threats against the Christians on his way to Damascus. Jesus came and knocked Saul down and said, Saul, why are you persecuting me? You don't know what you're messing with, Canada.
Yeah.
Right? You're messing with Jesus.
Come on now, preacher.
He's the king and he's the Lord. And you're messing with him.
Oh, we ain't gonna get nowhere. Come on now.
Mess with his people.
Come on now.
So be encouraged, Canada.
Free James Coates. Yeah.
Jesus is coming for these fools. Until they kiss the Son.
Woo.
That's right.
You better. We ain't gonna get nowhere.
That's really good. Are we gonna get to the news segment? But this does get us to our conference.
No,
this
news.
gets us to our rally.
That is news. Just be clear. This is news.
That's right.
The news is that Jesus is coming for Canada.
Hey, you better say it.
Because you're messing with our brother, his brother, Jesus' friend, James Coates, and his family, and his church, and his neighbors. Okay, that's news. That's news.
Man,
that's good.
We're going to take up some offer now.
We're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be if you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids.
It's over.
Bring your offerings up. Don't they have a website if you want to give to James Coates? Is it at the church website?
You can just go to his church's website.
This is why you need the app, because you're going to have these notes in the app. If you want to be a blessing to them, you can go to the website and be I'm having an offer time.
Search Fight Laugh Feast on your app. That's why we're going to South Dakota. Rapid City, South Dakota. Governor Kristi Noem was the only governor in the union to read her constitution. She has a constitutional backbone.
Yeah.
Even the Republicans don't really want to touch her.
No, because she ain't going to be controlled by your whims.
She's not playing political games.
Come on now.
She just cares about her people.
You trying to get this organ
and the truth. And the truth.
Anyways, so we're going to Rapid City because we want to encourage you. We're gonna love God. We're gonna sing psalms. And we are gonna defy tyrants.
What's wrong with you,
right?
people?
I heard Aaron Snell is coming.
Aaron Snell, we got to get him on the show.
Yes.
He was at the national conference.
He was leading our psalm sing.
He's like at the top, at the front of the column of the army.
Yeah,
he was
teaching us how to sing, how to shout our praises.
We're kicking off the conference with beer and psalms on Thursday night,
and then we're going to sing psalms all through the weekend.
All through the weekend, we have an after party Thursday night. We're doing something special every night. So kind of after,
and then a Sabbath feast.
Yep,
Saturday evening at the end of the conference.
Well, we're working on that. I'm working on that.
There's going to be a Sabbath feast.
Yeah, there is.
Just so I want to remind everybody, you're talking about Aaron Snell. It's the image that was at the Tennessee conference was amazing. He's up there teaching, and if you're in the back, you see all these people who are raising their hands and singing God's psalms. Yeah. And I was just we're never going to get to the news. I was just recently reading again about Jehoshaphat. And he comes and restores the kingdom. Yeah. But one of the first things he did was restore the worship of God's people. Yeah, right. And right now, if you look, what's broken is the church. Right. And he goes out and does this. I believe it's in 2 Chronicles chapter 19, chapter 20.
Yeah, it's right in there.
And one of the first things that happens, the battle rages hotter.
The armies are coming.
Yeah, you know where I'm going.
Because they're worshiping God.
They're worshiping God. And then a prophet steps up while they're worshiping God and says, don't worry, you won't have to fight this battle. Yeah. And another army comes in and destroys the army that's coming after them, and then they kill themselves. Yep. This is amazing. And then after that, they come in.
There's more.
Yeah, they come in, and the spoils are all there. Yep. God had blessed them so much because of the worship that it took them 3 days to gather all the spoils that are in there.
That's the feminists and the trannies fighting and killing each other.
Come on. The wealth of the wicked is laid up for the just.
The statists and the woke and the BLM and the LGBT jihad, they can all kill each other.
That's right.
And God's people can be standing there and say, hey, look, I guess we'll run Apple then.
Yeah. Come on.
But I guess we'll run Amazon.
Here's one of the reasons why it's so important to learn to sing Psalms. I've been reading Psalm 119 every day, which has been a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
And in Psalm 119, verses 98 and 99. So you gotta get deep in it to get to this verse. Right. But it says, David says, your commandments make me wiser than all my enemies. Yeah. For it is ever with me. I have more understanding than all my teachers, for your testimonies are my meditation.
Too bad that's Old Testament.
All scripture is God breathed, brother. All scripture.
Got to get woke to that, Gabe.
Jehoshaphat, then it keeps going. And the armies are coming against him, and Jehoshaphat says he prays the Lord, and he then sets up the choir.
That's right.
And the choir goes out in front of the army.
That's right.
And it says that as the choir sang, God set ambushes for the enemies of God. Yeah. So that's why we're going to sing. That's why you need to come to Rapid City. Come sing with us.
Yep. Wasn't that Psalm 124, or we think it was Psalm 124 that the choir would go out before the army and sing Psalm 124?
That was the Scottish Reformation.
Was it?
You can't look at
our Israel probably did it first.
All the Psalms are war songs, though.
Well, and you can't look at our situation now and not find the same kind of resemblance where the armies of God, or the church of God, is not meeting. We're sit back. We're not having worship.
And that's why they don't want us to meet. I'm not saying all the politicians know what they're doing, but the principalities and powers know.
They know what they're doing.
They don't want us to meet for worship. They don't want God's people breaking bread and drinking wine with joy to the Lord for their salvation.
Look, and we're already seeing this with Texas and Mississippi. Right. This is not even talking about church.
No, that's right.
The liberals are mad that Texas and Mississippi are opening up.
Right.
That's not even talking about church.
No, every time that God does something on behalf of his people, there was another, who was it? Was it Josiah or... Oh, right before that, but there was another king.
Hezekiah?
Might have been Hezekiah, where they start praying. I think it was Hezekiah, because they'd have this huge army that was threatening, said, Hezekiah's torn down all the altars and say you only can have one altar. Yeah. First thing that happens every time is worship is restored. Worship is restored. And then God goes out.
The enemies come.
The enemies come, and God sent out an angel, because he started praying, sent out an angel and smote all the leaders of that army. The king goes back and his people smite him. Yep. I mean, come on. If you don't even have to fight. What you need to do is go before the Lord in your churches.
Right.
Get on your knees, and won't he move for you? Okay, I'm done.
Samaritan Ministries connects hundreds of thousands of Christians across the nation who help one another with their medical needs. Samaritan Ministries is one of our sponsors.
We love Samaritan.
Believe in what they do. It's all Christians helping one another with their medical needs without the use of insurance.
Yeah.
There are no network restrictions. As a Samaritan,
Free yourself.
As a Samaritan member, when a healthcare need arises, you just choose your own doctor, your own hospital, your own treatment, your own pharmacy.
That's a free man.
And then Samaritan Ministries connects you with other members that pray for you. Speaking of prayer, the power of prayer, and then just send a financial gift directly to someone who will help you, that you're helping with their medical expenses. My family's done this for a number of years. Yeah. We send our check to someone every month. We stop and we pray for the family or the individual that has a need. You can join anytime. New members are always welcome. This is how the body of Christ works together. You can learn more at SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic. Let them know that we sent you.
I just want to remind everybody, if you've been watching Samaritan during the time of the pandemic, they've been ahead. Mm-hmm. They've been thinking ahead of this whole situation. They were ahead of They were sending out computers to their people who needed them, who were working from home and who were homeschooling and who had kids in school so that they can get on the internet and do their business before the government was.
Right. They were already
thinking about
an anti-fragile community
way before,
all around healthcare.
Way before.
Speaking of our health, the CDC came out with a study. It's got to be legit.
Really?
Who cares?
Yeah, it's got to be legit. The study says that basically the CDC study says that masks are showing some effect.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
I award
you no points, and may God have mercy on you.
I'm just the messenger. I'm just the
messenger.
They may have some effect on making people more sick.
Actually, that's actually what's happened.
The charts that you showed us, where I mean, first of all, there's no significant difference. You show where the mask mandate, mask mandate. Yeah. But actually,
we need to revisit that.
If you zoom in a little bit closer, I mean, it's basically the same shape. Doesn't matter. Uh-huh. But if you zoom in a little bit close, the people with mask mandates have higher rates. Than people without mask mandates.
So there were...
Is that what the CDC study says?
No, they don't say that. No. In states with a mandate in effect, this is the people who are actually critiquing... Who is
the American Institute for Economic Research. Okay, so a good organization.
They said around 9,605,000 who were confirmed with COVID-19 cases, which works out on an average of 27 cases per 100,000 people per day. When the states didn't have a statewide order, including states were never with mandates... Where was it? Averaging 17 cases per 100,000. So I guess there was 7 people less when they didn't have a mandate.
17 cases.
Yeah. In other words, no difference.
So there was really no difference. And
17 cases.
So there's 15 states that never did
per 100,000.
Right. So 27 cases per 100,000 versus 17 cases per 100,000. With no mandate.
That's funny to tell me. So, but put it this way.
It doesn't matter.
Meaning it didn't matter at all.
The CDC says...
Except for the economic resources that state had got crushed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, no, they're not taking...
Pop.
Yeah.
Crushed. So, there's 15 states.
A bunch of people got yelled at in grocery stores.
There's 15 states that never did a mask mandate. Okay. And 8 of the 15 states are in the bottom half of deaths per 1,000, per 100,000. Right. Or maybe it's deaths per 1 million. Right. And so 8 of the bottom of the states rank in the bottom half, and then 7 of the states rank in the top 25 kind of thing.
But
in other words, it's negligence.
Yeah, okay. No. It is negligence.
It is negligence.
Right.
It is
negligent.
Thank you. Oh my goodness!
It's completely ineffectual. It doesn't matter. It's a wash.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not a wash.
Except it's not.
Yeah, it's not a wash because there are people who died during this pandemic, and they couldn't see them for the last time. They couldn't. Right. What's the value of that?
Right. Yeah.
I can't see grandma. Marcus just went with that with his grandmother.
Yeah, my wife's grandfather passed away this winter, and it was last time we saw him was last June. Yeah, through glass.
Wow.
And he didn't have human touch from his family for the last 9 months of his life. I mean his wife thankfully was there with him. Yeah. But it was through glass. We sang a psalm to him through the glass with a cell phone. Of course you could pass a cell phone in that I had kissed and it was all over my face.
Oh my goodness.
I can't. You're gonna make me cry.
No, it's absolutely insane. And we did. Cuomo did this, but we all did this.
We did.
We have massively dishonored our fathers and our mothers. And this is what happens. When you turn away from God, when you do things your own way, you kill people. People are crushed. Lives are crushed. It really does matter whether you obey God or not. You can't say I'm a Christian, but that doesn't apply to politics. That doesn't apply to the public square. Look, that's the one thing that God's taught us in 2020. It matters. It does matter. Lives are at stake.
Yeah. And how can you trust people who don't know how to acknowledge a man and a woman?
Yeah.
Or a human being in the womb, and you're going to trust them to tell you.
They're in the image of God.
They don't understand human touch and the value of that.
No.
All right, so we got to talk about the Voters' Rights Act, and we got to talk about the George Floyd that passed the Senate. That's going to come up next.
And the 14th Amendment.
And the 14th. Civil Rights Act. Okay, there's so much to talk about. More coming up on Cross Politics. We hope you have the app.
We're gonna cover everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Free James Coates. More Cross Politics coming up next.
When a medical need arises, hundreds of thousands of Christians across the nation care for one another by sharing financially for those medical needs. Samaritan members pray and reflect God's love and care by providing for one another. While times continue to change, God's love doesn't. He cares for us as we are called to care for one another.
James Coates. Oh,
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's what my head is.
The show is brought to you by Free James Coates.
That's right.
There we go.
Right.
Welcome back to Cross Politics on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. We are very grateful to have with us right now on the line Mr. Matt Braynard. He's the former director of data and strategy for the Trump campaign.
Woo!
Drafted and executed this strategy of targeting low propensity voters who had a high affinity for President Trump. That might have been me. I don't know. He's the president of Braynard Group, a political and digital strategy firm. He's worked for over 100 federal, state, and municipal candidates and many national advocacy organizations and nonprofits.
Man, I should have hired him when I was running for Latah County Commissioner.
You couldn't afford it.
I don't think
Probably not. Probably not.
Previously worked on messaging and survey research for Frank Lutz, was a senior redistricting and election administration analysis at Election Data Services, has served for 3 election cycles in the Republican National Committee's political analysis department. Prior to joining the RNC in 96, Matt was a field coordinator for Buchanan for president. After the 2020 general election, Matt founded and led the Voter Integrity Project to discover illegal ballots.
Oh, we got to talk about that.
No, he didn't.
Other election
No.
anomalies. He is the executive director of Look Ahead America. Matt, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here with you guys.
So first off, just maybe explain, what is Look Ahead America? Why did you start it, and what is it for?
Sure. So Look Ahead America is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, 501c3 organization.
I don't believe it.
It was. We've got some skeptics in the crowd. Huh? Well, I'll be happy to show you the IRS determination letter. But we were started by myself and 30 former Trump campaign staffers. Our primary goal was to register, educate, and turn out to vote disaffected patriotic Americans of rural and blue-collar background. Our other focus is ensuring voter integrity, and that has been part of our mission from the start. And in the aftermath of the 2020 election, we started a new effort called the Voter Integrity Project within Look Ahead America. And we got involved in quite a few court cases. We're producing research and reports not only on what happened in the 2020 election, but we've got a massive group of activists across the country whom we've trained. In the last month, we've trained over 3,000 activists live on how to get engaged with their state legislatures and county governments in the fight for voter integrity, as well as other patriotic causes.
Well, so you must be the man to ask this question to then.
What's that? Which is? Was
there election fraud in 2020?
We've identified enough illegal ballots that the winner of the election, the number of votes that the winners got in the enough pivotal states is surpassed by the number of illegal ballots that we're able to document. And we believe that the conclusion of this is that the deserved winner of the presidential election is unknowable. We presented some of this evidence in our court cases where we were basically experts in producing expert reports, and we're going to be rolling out reports on Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, and potentially Pennsylvania within the next several months. Probably going to be releasing a report on Georgia, I think, next week. We wanted to get it done today, but some things are taking longer than we thought. Basically documenting that the number of illegal ballots surpassed the margin of victory. And most of these were cast by people who did not have legal residency in the state of Georgia. They may have had an old address in Georgia, and now they live in New York City, but they figured, hey, my vote doesn't matter in New York City, I'm going to cast it in Georgia. This happens every election.
Wow.
But this time, the margin was so close that these actually were able to make a difference.
Wow.
So that's what we're really highlighting. And unlike, there are a lot of crazy claims that have been made out there. I'm not going to comment on anybody individually or statistical analysis saying that this proves it.
Right.
But we have names and numbers and addresses of people who do not live in, say, for example, the state of Georgia, or they registered with an illegal address, like doctored a post office box to look like an apartment building, that were illegal, not eligible to vote. So it's pretty clear cut from our point of view, and we're going to be pushing that case, not because we think the election outcome is going to be reversed or something, but in an effort to get meaningful reforms in these states.
So how did you get access to those voters? How did you get access to the paperwork, the physical data? Because a lot of what we've been, hearing.
He can tell you, but he have to kill you.
Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's, there are a lot of people that make claims about voter fraud and illegal ballots, et cetera, but they're on sort of a basis of trust me or trust this mathematical formula that proves it. We took the raw data from the Secretary of State of Georgia immediately after the election, all the people that voted. We ran that up against another federal and public database, the National Change of Address database. That's where you send a notice to get your mail forwarded, but you tell the federal government, look, I am permanently moving to another address out of state.
Right.
We have the list of addresses where people are registered to vote, and we match that up against Kinko's or FedEx shops or UPS stores or post offices that are not legal places to declare as your residence. We also found other states' voter databases and found somebody that was registered in Georgia, for example, but then moved to South Carolina, registered to vote there, thus nullifying their ability to vote in the state of Georgia.
Got it.
And there are enough of these cases, it's completely transparent.
Yeah.
Enough of these cases that there were more of these ballots cast than the margin of victory in Georgia, and we believe similar situation occurred in Wisconsin and in Arizona and potentially in Pennsylvania. So without Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona, the current president wouldn't be president.
Go ahead.
Matt, are you saying that this was a decisive reason for Trump losing, or are there other factors that are in play for why Trump lost?
So the margins here were so close that I do believe electoral ballots, and we can, I think, prove this beyond reasonable doubt, affected the outcome of the election. However, what had a much more substantial impact on the election, 100 to 1,000 times greater, was the fact that the left was extremely well funded over the last 4 years in an effort to register, educate, and turn out to vote their voters in these urban bases, centers of these swing states, like Fulton County, for example. And there was no effort by patriotic organizations or conservatives on the right to do the same thing, to turn out these disaffected patriotic Americans. And that's why I look at America's primary mission is so important. Everybody gets very excited about voter fraud, but what I can promise you has had a much bigger impact was the fact that so many people who should have turned out to vote, they were never reached, they were never brought into the system, and that's what Look Ahead America's primary mission is.
Wow.
Got it.
So looking at this too, hearing so much out there, everybody's talking about big tech and how they've operated, Facebook and Twitter, whoever you want to call, and they've helped swing things to a particular way. Now, there's no doubt that big tech has some sort of play in our elections, but where's their hand in all of this? How are they operating in our elections?
Sure. Well, they had two very big hands. One is the very obvious hand of suppressing news stories that were damaging to one candidate in the last election.
Right.
That had a tremendous impact, basically deleting a very, I think, significant New York Post story, preventing it from being shared or spread. And that happened all across the board because I think they were in the tank for one of those candidates.
Right.
And that was a very obvious way, but a much less obvious way is that they were the ones that were funding efforts of people like Stacey Abrams in Georgia to go out and deep into it. And here's the thing, people get caught up about voter fraud and illegal ballots, but in the aftermath of the 2020 general election, I walked through neighborhoods in Fulton County myself, knocking on doors, confirming whether or not people existed and whether or not they voted. And I went through entire neighborhoods of people that Stacey Abrams registered to vote, educated, and turned out to vote. And there was nothing like that on the right. And the reason she was able to do that is because she had tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars from major left-wing donors like Zuckerberg, like Tom Steyer, like George Soros. And Look Ahead America, I look up, every day I see my donations come in. It's a bunch of 25s and 50s and $5 contributions from the grassroots. So we have nothing like this in terms of funding. And I hate to say it, but funding makes a difference. If I had anything commiserate to do with what Stacey Abrams did, maybe things would have been quite different. She registered maybe 1 million or more voters.
Wow.
We could have done the same thing on the right, but unfortunately, I've spent the last 4 years, here's a little inside story. There's a big meeting that happens in Washington, D.C. every week. And at that meeting, you have White House people, you have Senate, House, leadership of every organization here in D.C. you've ever heard of. And every year I go out at the beginning of the year and I presented slides. And I said, okay, in the last year, these are the new progressive voters that have been registered. And these are the new conservative voters that have been registered in these swing states. And every year that deficit got higher and higher and higher.
Wow.
And I would go to do that meeting, and I finished my presentation. I get a very polite round of applause, but I get no questions. Nobody want to come up and talk to me. Nobody want to discuss anything. We're always caught up in these things that are of the moment that don't really matter very much. Like you can imagine the tremendous amount of oxygen consumed over, the death of Jeffrey Epstein, right? It doesn't really matter what happened to him. It doesn't matter what happened to him insofar as your ability to do something about it or its impact. I mean, if you look at our organization's name, look ahead. Look ahead at things that are important, that matter in the long term, that are maybe not sexy or scintillating or not click-worthy in the short term. But these are things that matter, and these are things that have tremendous impact on our elections. The left has been doing a phenomenal job for generations of registering, educating, and turning out people to vote. Now, has fraudulent votes been a component of that? Has illegal ballots? I think the answer to that is yes. But that is dwarfed by the actual real people that they've been able to engage and turn out to vote and convince that, look, progressive causes are their causes. And, hopefully, and here's a sad thing. I've been struggling with Look Ahead America for the last 4 years. And my wife said to me, people aren't really paying you any attention, but maybe it will take Trump losing for them to recognize the importance of your mission. I said, honey, I do not want to see that happen. That would be horrific.
Here we are.
But it did happen, and maybe now people will start paying attention to something that's very unsexy and unclick-worthy, but is of vital importance.
So wait, I got a follow-up question here. So how did Trump win against Hillary? If the Democrats have been registering and doing this stuff, how did Trump beat Hillary?
I think that he had a unique appeal that was able to get voters to consider voting for him that would never have previously considered voting Republican, because he did not look like your central casting stock Bob Dole, Mitt Romney, John McCain Republican. Did not talk about those issues. Talked about issues that transcended the typical left-right dichotomy that we've seen in this country. He was Look at America as an America First organization. Donald Trump was an America First candidate, and he spoke about things and tackled issues that were kind of contrary to the orthodoxy of much of this, the position of the Republican Party and the typical dominant voices in it, which are, business first, or the Chamber of Commerce priorities and issues like why we have to have open borders and we have to have free trade and we've got to suppress artificially the cost of labor in this country, et cetera, et cetera. So he was able to approach that. But the thing is, the left in some ways were caught with their pants down. They weren't expecting to be as strong as he was or happy he was. And they went into overdrive over the last 4 years. Again, they've spent more than they've ever spent in the past on these nonprofit, truly nonpartisan efforts to turn out the places that they know that people are sympathetic to their messaging, and then they show up and vote, and they make a choice. And again, nobody did that on the right. So basically, they went in overdrive these last 4 years to make sure what happened this time to them did not, or that happened in 2016 didn't happen again. And it's hard to say that they didn't have an impact.
Right. So is there big tech for conservatives? I mean, other than MyPillow and Goya Foods? I mean, are there...
Because how are you going to compete?
Are there other big techs that just need to be encouraged and drawn out, or does it not exist?
So part of Look Ahead America's mission is that voter registration, education, and turnout, those are very expensive operations. And we haven't really raised the type of money to engage with that fully. But one thing we have found is that we've got a lot of volunteers who are active and interested in helping us, who are able to donate their time and their energies. And we've been training them on how to lobby their county and state governments. And one of our initiatives that we've rolled out in terms of policy objective is to help to establish something called free speech states. Now, a lot of folks say, well, state governments have passed laws saying that you can't censor, Twitter can't censor conservatives, etc. And that's a good pathway to pursue, but I don't know that that will stand up to constitutional scrutiny, etc. But one thing that state governments can make a decision about, and they frequently make this decision on other matters, is to say that you're entitled to do what you want with your company, but you're not entitled to become enriched with taxpayer dollars paid for by citizens whom you are censoring. So our free speech state concept would prevent a state from doing business with a social media network that censors legal speech, with a tech firm that deplatforms people based on their politics and legal political activity, or doesn't do business with financial institutions who will de-person, unperson folks who are engaging in legal businesses, be it a gun shop or something like that, which are being targeted now by financial institutions. And what that will do is force tech companies, if we get enough states on board with this, to make a decision. Either they can decide that we're not going to continue censoring legal speech or deplatforming people engaged in their First Amendment rights of political activity, etc. Or we're going to say, look, we're going to keep censoring. We're going to keep deplatforming people. We don't care about the state's business. And that will create contracts that can no longer go to them, that can then go to new companies that can create this new ecosystem of social media, tech, and financial institutions that will, this new ecosystem that will respect First Amendment rights. So again, we have trained people in the states to advocate for this, and we're going to be ramping up that effort very significantly because, at least in terms of like a financial perspective for as an institution, that doesn't cost us very much to do, and we're happy to provide leadership on that initiative as well as other initiatives we want to see states take advantage of, such as voter integrity. One thing to recognize is one place you don't have strength is Washington, D.C. right now. Patriots don't have a lot of strength.
Yeah.
But one place they have a tremendous amount of strength is in the state legislatures. So we have to go to where we have strength and leverage it. And the way to leverage that is by getting our activists to put pressure on their state legislators to pass free speech state initiatives and to pass voter integrity reforms that are very important to them. And that's where we're engaging right now. And again, that doesn't cost nearly as much as the very difficult task of registering, educating, and turning out new voters. But we're happy to make the difference where we can.
There's so much I want to ask you, man. Looking at the last election and how it ended, looking at lost the House for the most part, lost the Senate. Do you think moving forward that how would you get people to think about, I guess, Trump's laws, and how do they need to be acting over the next 2 years, next 4 years as things are moving forward?
I think we need to get away from the mindset that there's anybody else out there who's going to save us. That there's anyone else out there helping us. There was this odd phenomenon that I think the media really inflated called the QAnon, the Q folks, right?
Sure.
And I think it's a problem for people. Some people are very gullible and they'll believe anything. But part of the problem with that was that it always portrayed the story that there are these government insiders who are fighting to save our country. There's no them. There's only us. So I'd ask anybody that has trouble with the way the last election went and said, well, what did you do? How many voters did you register? How many people in your family that you know that are eligible to vote that didn't vote did you drive to the polls? Or did you call them every day and ask them to get that absentee ballot? Did you bring an absentee ballot to their home? Did you do this with your church? How many people did you talk to after church every day saying, did you vote? Are you registered to vote? Did you set up a table outside your church to help people register to vote? There is no them, there's only us. So if you did not take these steps, and I personally look back and I say, well, what did I do? Or what steps did I miss over the last 4 years? I accept responsibility for the outcome of this election. And I think everybody in your audience who did not like how this thing turned out, they have to start by accepting responsibility, what they missed, what opportunities they missed to affect it. And then say, okay, well, what can I do now? And one thing I can offer them, volunteer with Look Ahead America. We will put you to work. We will train you. We will give you guidance and leadership and help you to become engaged. But again, we can't do this without you. And I'm not even just asking for, money obviously helps. Obviously we accept donations, but we're just as eager to get volunteers because we will put you to work and make a difference. But you got to get off the couch.
Have you been paying attention to the For the People Act, better known as HR 1?
Mm-hmm.
Could you?
I have.
What's your take on that?
I think that it's a very big piece of legislation. It has a lot of things in it that people aren't focusing on. And I think a lot of it, you never can tell, but I think some aspects of it will be declared unconstitutional, particularly the way the federal government is forcing states to consider how they draw their congressional districts.
Right.
That's something that is well reserved historically to the states to determine. I don't know how that necessarily will pass constitutional muster, especially with the way the Supreme Court is currently configured. Yeah. There are other things in it that are really toxic. I think this legislation allows politicians to accept contributions and put that money directly in their personal pockets. That's never been the case before. Politicians have gone to jail, prison for this before have lost office. Now it's going to legalize that. And I think in some ways it looks to me like bribery. There are also a lot of things that this law does to affect the way that elections themselves are run. And I've got some bad news is that I'm not sure those things are necessarily going to fail a constitutional test. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But it's very likely this piece of legislation is going to pass. Now, Look Ahead America has put forward our policy objectives to reform the way elections are run, our voter integrity reforms, and we're fighting for them in multiple states right now. Our advocates are pushing them forward. Louisiana is actually the top of our list right now, but there's 6 different reforms. And what I sort of like about our reforms is that they eliminate virtually all of the problems that we had with the 2020 general election, but they're also kind of compatible with H.R. 1, because I did read H.R. 1, and I think that many things that we're trying to do with our policy objectives are actually in harmony in some ways take advantage of some of the provisions in H.R. 1. I mean, one thing H.R. 1 does do is it requires paper ballots for everything. They also sort of establish an interstate cooperation to ensure that people aren't registered to vote in multiple states. However, participation in that is not mandatory. So, one of the things we're going to do is push states to actively participate in this to get people off their voter rolls who don't belong in it. H.R. 1 does make it very difficult to do this in some ways, but I think that between court decisions rendering what's unconstitutional in that legislation, between our reforms being compatible but still able to eliminate much of the voter fraud, and the public's disgust at incumbent members of the House and Senate voting for legislation that allows them to personally pocket campaign contributions, will energize people to vote against them in the future. You may recall that the House flipped parties in 1994 in part because of this type of scandal, because of the members taking advantage of the Postal Service or voting for themselves, pay raises, etc. So hopefully this is the kind of thing that can have some play in some of the congressional district races that will decide the control of the House moving forward.
So one last thing on the voter fraud thing that you didn't mention. So, everybody's been yelling and screaming about the Dominion machines. What's your take on the Dominion machines business?
Well, I've actually received now 2 threatening letters from Dominion's attorneys, and we've responded to them, and people can read about that on our website, lookatamerica.org, which is really unusual because we never made any claims about vote switching happening at the machine level or anybody's machines. We never specifically identified any problem. That was we focused entirely on ballots being cast by people who shouldn't be able to cast. Right? We didn't look at the counting side of things. Right. However, I think one of the reasons we're drawing so much scrutiny is because one of our policy objectives is to outlaw black box voting equipment. Black box voting equipment runs on hardware and software whose source code is a secret. The public, elected officials can't look at it and review it. It's a corporate secret. And I think that invites a lot of suspicion about how these votes are tallied. I can also tell you that Princeton did a peer-reviewed scientific study and found that these proprietary machines are not only susceptible to hacking, but they're susceptible to hacking in such a way that you don't even know that they're hacked. I'm calling them black box voting machines, but what I want to replace them with are glass box voting machines. In a glass box, there's nowhere for you to hide a trap door or a secret entrance. Right. And we're leading this fight across the country, especially, again, in Louisiana. Thankfully, due to pressure from people that are working with our organization, the state has withdrawn its $100 million purchase order for voting equipment that would be using these black box systems. And I think it's really important that we not have our votes counted by software and hardware that we're not allowed to review. Now, look, I'm not sure if any of you guys are like computer programmers or anything. I'm sure that if the source code was public, I don't know that all of you guys would be readily downloading it, identifying it, and trying to find potential flaws.
Every night.
What you would do is you would find people, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent, libertarian, whatever, but you would find people that you trust who do have that ability, who would review that and say, look, you may not like how the election came out, but I can tell you that these machines are secure. There was no interference on the machines themselves, so you can at least trust what the way they counted the ballots. I think that's important. And more than that, it's not just about voter integrity. When these states contract to purchase this equipment, they're not just buying the equipment, they're buying a service contract to service these machines for like a generation, 20 years longer maybe, however long they're in. And that contract goes to a company that in all likelihood is not in the state, may not even be in the United States. Yeah. So by going to open source glass box voting equipment, the service contracts can in fact potentially go to IT firms, tech support firms within that state, rather than sending jobs, millions and millions of dollars in jobs out of state. They can build jobs in state. So it's not just about election integrity, which is absolutely the number one most important thing here. Sure. It's also about creating jobs in their home state. So these are arguments that our activists are bringing to state legislators to tell them, look, we just need to ban this black box voting equipment. It'll increase confidence in the elections, and it's probably going to be cheaper, and it has the potential to create home state jobs rather than shipping our tax dollars out of state or maybe even overseas.
Yeah.
No wonder you got a letter from Dominion.
I was going to say, thanks, Matt. Now we're going to get one, too. Thanks. Matt Braynard, lookaheadamerica.org, lookaheadamerica.org. Matt, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Happy to be here.
More Cross Politic coming up next.
Hi, I'm Robert Borton, CEO of Classical Conversations. Our most precious commodity is time. No one has ever lied on their deathbed wishing they had spent more time making money. They all wish they had spent more time creating a legacy. Our modern education system steals that legacy, steals that time from our children. That's why I'm passionate about homeschooling. That's why at Classical Conversations we want to give you more time to create that legacy, follow your passions, and glorify God. Visit classicalconversations.com for more information.
Man, I like Matt.
Yeah.
He said he'd come back on again.
He said he would.
Glass boxes. We want glass boxes.
Yeah. Sunshine. Light.
Yeah.
Transparency.
And everybody should want that. Whatever side you're on. Everybody wants integrity, right? Truth. Hey, welcome back to Cross Politic on the one and only Fight, Laugh, Feast Network.
You know what's crazy? I'm going.
I want to remind you, free James Coates.
Free James Coates.
Also,
free James Coates. Don't get me started. See, I was calming down a little bit. I was calming down.
You didn't.
No.
I want to remind you that one of the best ways you can help us is by becoming a Fight, Laugh, Feast club member.
Amen.
We are trying to build a network that is anti-fragile.
Amen.
That is cancel proof. That's not dependent on big tech or any of these things. So what we have is this subscription model. So basically, you become a member. There's different tiers: bronze. What is it? Silver. Gold,
keep
platinum.
Keep going
There's
up.
one that we don't talk about hardly ever. We should talk about, which is the high five.
Oh, high five!
I love the high five. The high five is great. So you might not be able to do the
$5 a month.
$5 a month,
and you get access to one of our club content exclusives.
That's right. So we make sure
for how long? For like a month? Or?
I think
I rotate. We rotate.
Rotate.
Yeah. All it is, it's just like
whatever Gabe feels about it.
Give us a tip. Yeah. It's just a high five.
And remember, you get a free T-shirt.
No, not at the high five level. High five is just access to digital content.
Okay,
this is good. This is why we talked about it.
But the rest of the tiers that you do get a free T-shirt, and there's some other gifts that come with some of the other tiers, but you get access to all kinds of behind-the-scenes content.
Do we have any more of those?
We've done interviews.
No, we all out. We all out.
We have behind-the-scenes interviews with Vody Bacham, Tom Askell, Doug Wilson. Who else? Gary DeMar.
Uncle Gary on God and Government. That is one of the most important series. There's 10 segments
also
with Uncle Gary.
Keith McCurdy, Raising Sturdy Kids. That's there.
Yeah, all that. Plus, we did a East Coast tour last year.
That's right.
Before the COVID hit.
There's a
we talked.
Or actually, Knox brought the COVID to the rest of the East Coast.
Whoa, hey.
Because he started out sick in Georgia.
You and Neil were dead. But we did Eric Erickson. We did Justin. What's his name? Giboney.
And along with Shobaraka. That's a great.
Walter Williams in his living room.
That was amazing.
Yes, we did.
That was amazing.
We did Kirk Kennedy and who else did we do?
Matt French
in Philly.
David
French.
Matt French. Wrong guy. Sorry, Matt. I didn't mean to call you. Sorry, Matt. I ain't apologizing to David. But Matt, I'm sorry.
But Maj Touré and Kirk Kennedy in Philly.
That was good. That was good. Yeah.
Anyways,
I really like Kirk.
All kinds of content in the club. If you're already a member and you're not taking advantage of that,
that's a lot of great content.
I also do a weekly Proverbs Bible study.
Yeah, that's that
we're dropping.
And don't forget, last year during the pandemic when it first hit, we dropped a bunch of content in behind the club portal, so people can have.
If you're a club member, you get $100 off your registration to the rally.
Free James Coat. It just comes out. Just comes out. See how you did that?
Okay.
All right. So I started off the show saying, would you vote for? Would you vote for the George Floyd bill? And it's got the name George Floyd on it. Yeah. Would you vote for it? So the House passed this bill.
Are you against police officers suffocating men on the sidewalk?
Yeah.
Wait a second. That's a false dichotomy. If I ever heard of one.
So the House, it actually passed in the House.
Yes.
A Reform Act named the George Floyd Act. And this act basically is going to kind of reform the bill that it actually is going to ban chokeholds.
Oh.
And it's going to overhaul kind of the qualified immunity protections for officers.
Knox, aren't you against chokeholds?
No, I'm not actually. I'm not against chokeholds.
No.
So if unfortunately, if we have a female officer who happens to be in a situation and she needs to use everything in her ability to be able to get out of it and to defend herself, I'm not going to limit her to what tools she can and can't use in a deadly situation. Now, I think. Well, I'm a little scared after the pandemic because I don't think a lot of people have common sense. But it's not about chokeholds. It's about whether or not the officer used anything out of sorts over and above of how he should have.
Yeah.
Right.
Excessive force.
Excessive force.
Yeah.
We already have that. We don't need to ban chokeholds. You know? And so I want an officer in a deadly situation because they're going to be in it.
What about chokeholds with, a belt? What about chokeholds with a chain?
Yeah.
What about chokeholds with a plastic strap rather than a leather one?
What about COVID chokeholds?
So let's
What's
say,
up now?
Let's say Chauvin didn't use his knee, but he used something else.
Yeah, right.
Right, now what?
You got to pass another law.
We got to pass another law.
No putting your shin bone on him. Not your kneecap.
By knee.
Shin bone, your foot.
Right. Well, and that's
your hand,
and that's exactly
your elbow.
Right. Because there's still something like a chokehold that you can use, but it depends on where you have your elbow in the person's neck, and so you can hit the side of the throat. But if you have underneath,
guys, you know what?
This
is the difference between prescriptive and canon law.
Right.
So biblical law is canon law. It requires using common sense. It requires using reasoning skills.
Yeah.
You have a principle. Here's the law. You must have a fence around the roof of your house to protect life. And if somebody falls off your roof, you're liable for their death.
That's right.
Okay. But the point of that is it's canon law. It's a case law. And what you do then is you reason from analogy and you say, well, what about swimming pools?
Right.
Oh, or what about you got a lake on your property?
Right.
But
the problem I have, Toby, with that is the logic that we've seen this last year. If we had canon law,
right, this goes back. I think this really goes back, though, Pastor Toby, really to your point that you were making last week with the pig playing. There's a premise.
I'm glad everybody remembers that pig playing the guitar.
No, and I think we need to remember that we need to have it on our cell phones and hit the play button when something happens and says just this.
Do you have that on a stinger yet?
It's funny because when you're arguing back and forth with someone, what does it have to do with Tia Texas on a Tuesday? And they're like, what? Yeah. You need to have that line available because that doesn't matter. What matters is what's the presupposition behind this? Right. What's the presupposition behind this? What does God say how we need to do this?
Right.
And that's what kills me about this. There's a couple things about this bill that really bothers me is that one way or another, it's making a federalized police force. No matter how you cut this bill, no matter what you do. And here's the thing. There's so many things. But here's the thing about this. Either with the federalized police bill, like you're going to have the federal government in some way or another, offering funds to all these little small entities, which they're created inside this bill, to look over the police department, to train the police department,
to hold them accountable,
and then report all the way back up.
Right. So you've got a few things here. Yeah. Keep this in mind. So first of all, you've got the problem of this prescriptive law versus canon law. Yeah. Okay, the way, this is a form of legalism where you have to list everything that's illegal.
Right.
You know, I said no jumping on the bed. I said no jumping on the bed with 1 foot. I said no jumping on the bed with, you just keep listing the things. That's problematic all by itself. Knox is pointing out the other thing that's problematic, the other presupposition that they're asking you to buy, it's the other assumption that they're asking you to take, is this idea that it's the federal government's job to oversee policing.
Yeah, and it's not.
It's not. And
same thing with the Voter Rights Act that we just talking about with Matt.
Exactly. The idea that the reason why historically policing has been done at the local level is because when you give somebody a gun, when you give them the power of the sword, you need close accountability.
Yeah.
Right.
Not federal accountability, not accountability of boards and committees and administrative rules and laws where it just gets lost.
Right.
That's a black box. Talk about a black box.
Yeah.
Where's the code?
Ghosted.
Where's the code for that?
Yeah.
It's lost in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Whereas we wanted sheriffs and municipal police to be accountable to the local people so that if they're abusing, if they're like arresting minors for putting stickers up, we can find out their name.
Yeah,
we can find out. We can talk to their boss. We can talk to the mayor, to the city council that's funding them, and you can deal with it at the local level. I think that's exactly right, Knox. Don't. You got to deny the assumption. You have to deny
that's
that.
Right. And here's why I think so. Growing up in a very highly policed, wrongly policed community.
Minneapolis. You refer to Minneapolis.
North side of Minneapolis, south side of Minneapolis, period. I mean, it's rough. But growing up in that environment, looking at this bill, there was natural parts of me that was drawn to it.
Right.
Because I knew at the moment that there would be some sort of, even something like this, I think even with Nate's whole situation, there are things in here that would require the police to act a particular type of way, and I don't even think they would have a case if something like this were to pass.
Right.
The discrimination laws, all that stuff. There's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh man, I would have lived so much differently.
It's an offer of salvation.
It is. What I don't see, when I wouldn't see then, that I see now is, wait a second, this opens up the door for even worse form of totalitarianism that I hate right now.
Right. And this is the sort of thing, though, we've been letting this camel under the tent. We've been letting this elephant in the teacup.
Okay.
we've been remember the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. All 10 of them were put in place because the anti-federalists, Patrick Henry, among the chief, said Patrick Henry went to his grave saying that the Constitution was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Patrick Henry went to his grave saying it was a bad idea.
Man, love to get him on the show.
He's in.
You can cancel him, but you can't get him on the show.
He's in heaven right now saying, "I told you so."
Yeah,
because his prophecy was when he read the Constitution. He says this is too much power for the federal government, and over time, the federal government is going to ultimately do the thing that we just rebelled from England over,
and a
centralized government. And so what they did was they came back and they offered the Federalists offered 10 amendments. That's the Bill of Rights. Yeah. And all 10 amendments, all 10 of them, are aimed at the federal government.
Yeah.
Right. The central government. The central federal government.
You cannot do this.
Cannot take away rights to free speech, the right to protest, the right to assemble, the right to religion, the right to bear arms. Right. The federal government cannot insist on you housing soldiers, cannot take away your due process.
Yeah.
It was all a bunch of red tape and yellow tape and flashing lights and barbed wire around the federal government.
Right. No, that's right.
Okay. Now, here's what happens. There are now 27 amendments in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And pretty much right after the 11th and 12th amendments, they were kind of the last ones that kind of focused on what the feds do and sort of limiting them. 12th Amendment was just about the vice president being separate than the president. After that, almost all of them have flipped the switch. Yeah. They have all now been actually aimed at what states cannot do.
Right.
The very thing that the Bill of Rights was intended to do, which was to keep feds in their place, got flipped around. And it started with, and the
13th Amendment,
which had to do with outlawing slavery in the states.
Yeah.
And
that's actually, Frederick Bastiat on the book on the law, he called this.
Yeah.
He called this, America is like, what they're doing is great, but they hadn't dealt with slavery.
Yeah.
Had they dealt with slavery in the beginning, and mainly dealing with slavery in the sense of making that black person a citizen of America,
right.
I don't think they would have had the same problem with the 14th Amendment and the 13th Amendment.
Right.
Because one thing that was happening, why this is all getting written, black people who were here weren't citizens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So what they did because of that, because of not dealing with it in the beginning like they should have, and had a better perspective of what freemen look like,
or instead of dealing with the problem even after the fact, in a more biblical way.
Well, even if they would have given citizenship to slaves, I think they wouldn't have the same sort of hooks that we get from the amendments, because that's what they're trying to fix after this. Well, what do we do with the slaves? Where they go? How do we deal with them?
So the 13th Amendment is the first shot, which says no slavery is outlawed,
right?
Except, of course,
where the federal government,
unless the jails take you,
unless you're James Coates,
right? Ooh, bars,
free James Coates. I mean,
what's wrong with
anybody that says that we have no slavery in America is wrong.
They're wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's millions of people incarcerated right now, and they're slaves, according to the 13th Amendment. Then the 14th Amendment comes along, and that's where constitutional scholars say that next to the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment is the single most litigated amendment in the whole Constitution.
Wow.
It makes sense, though.
Because what happened was that's where we really turned the corner. The 13th sort of tells the states they can't do slavery anymore. But all by itself didn't really revolutionize everything.
No.
What the 14th Amendment does, though, is it says, it's the sort of doctrine of incorporation. It says that the rights that were preserved and protected in the First Amendment and then the Bill of Rights that the feds could not take away from the states. The 14th Amendment explicitly says basically the feds can also now require the states not to take those rights away from their citizens.
Right.
And that's actually the 14th Amendment is the one that establishes citizenship for everybody who's born and naturalized in the United States.
Right. Yeah.
It was aiming particularly at former slaves.
Right.
But then what it says is now the feds, this is setting up the precedent that now the feds can go after states who they believe are taking away their rights of free speech, assembly, religion, all those sorts of things, those civil rights.
Right.
Now the feds can sort of insist that the states not take those things away from the citizens of the country.
Right.
Because now they're citizens of the country.
Right.
So the country says we have an interest in protecting them.
So something happens with George Floyd, and all of a sudden the federal government can come and say, we're changing all the policing.
So since the 1860s, 1870s, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, that's what's been creeping up. It's not been right away, but we talked about this with the Civil Rights Act,
64 legislation, the Transgender Equality Act,
and all the Equality Act stuff, and that's what's kind of in the background though of even this kind of thing is the federal government's sort of assuming the responsibility of making sure that citizens have all their rights protected.
And truthfully, I mean, when you think about it, if you're going to go down this road, you got to have something like this.
Well, where are the brakes?
Right. Well, that's the problem. We don't know how to discriminate, so there are none.
Right.
We can't reason there are none, so we can make whatever we want to do. But we had a real problem. Right. Part of what was going on was,
But this.
So what should they have done? I mean, at this point, if you got the 13th Amendment, so there's no more slavery, how do you then work with states that are going to do whatever they want to do?
Yeah. Well,
right.
I would argue that we should have used a free market. That's what we should have done.
Right.
We should have used a free market. We should have said basically, look, we should have what Romans 13 says is that godly magistrates praise the righteous and they punish criminals,
evildoers.
So where there actually was crime being committed, states should uphold their laws. But I think they you should have used the bully pulpit and praised people who were allowing black businesses to start, allow them to vote, and so on. And what we should have done is let it just work its way out of time. You've talked about this before, Gabe, in terms of pro-life, in terms of, let Washington, in some sense, if they want to kill their babies, let them kill their babies. Idaho, outlaw abortion. South Dakota, outlaw abortion. Florida, Texas, whatever. This is a state where we don't kill our babies. And this is a state, I would say the same thing with marriage. In our state, we don't do sodomite marriages. We don't do gay marriage. It's one man, one woman. Protect them with good divorce laws and so on. And then over time, let that culture develop.
That's right.
Where do people want to live? I mean, right now people are fleeing Washington and Oregon and California and New York.
That's right.
Because they're trying to find free places. And I think what we should have done is allow it to work its way out
and
like that.
And it would have done pretty fast. If Black Wall Street could have did what they did in the 1920s under that type of criticism, think of how much more slaves could have done, being that they were the driving force of all of America as it related to economics, right? Slavery, the slaves were doing all the work and creating most of the economics in America. Well, let them go to the free states and do whatever they want to do.
Right. We have to trust freedom, basically. God gives us freedom.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't need the state. We don't need the feds.
That's right.
To give us our rights or our freedom. They don't give it to them. We got it from God.
Yeah.
And over time, people will do bad things with their freedom sometimes.
Yeah, but if we don't have a Christian culture to be able to show how this operates and how this lives out, then they don't see an example of it to say this is the alternative to what that is.
But we're seeing an alternative right now with James Coates in jail.
That's right.
Free James Coates.
Free James Coates. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until next week, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic. Free James Coates.
2020. God exposed America with a bunch of viral particles, a plague. God flicked and we buckled. Our political leaders shut down their states in fear. Our pastors abdicated the church as non-essential, and we have been scattered by petty, tyrannical resolutions and edicts into our homes or hiding our shame with masks. Businesses have been shut down by arbitrary non-essential labels. Strip clubs, pot shops, and abortion facilities remained open, while churches were threatened, regulated, and fined. First Amendment rights were trampled on as we Christians were arrested by despotic, unprincipled local governments. Citizens were harassed by unelected health districts, and communities were threatened in their houses by cops. This sounds like a third world country, a bad dream, but it is not. It is the new America. This America is ruled by fear. This America is ruled by opportunistic politicians who don't give a damn about you. This America breeds a compliant citizenry that cares more about their strip clubs and DoorDash deliveries, that cares more about their safety and their comforts, than the truth that Jesus is King of Kings and that our freedoms are protected by the Constitution. This America is worse than King George III's America. It's time to take a stand, but to stand requires courage, and courage requires repentance. What we need is reformation and revival in our churches, in our families, in our communities, in our businesses, and in our government. Every square inch needs the blood of Jesus. We need to seize this moment where all our sins, fears, and failures have been exposed by God through this plague, and gather to sing psalms, to feast, and to get strengthened, to be encouraged, and equipped to lead America back to Jesus, who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Governor after governor instituted some sort of shutdown, ignoring your constitutional rights. There was one governor, one state, that did not buckle and join the crowd of governors driven by fear. Governor Christine Noem has stood strong through this pandemic, and so we are bringing our first annual Fight, Laugh, Feast rally to Rapid City, South Dakota, April 29th through May 1st. Join us in the land of the free and the home of the brave as we learn to love God, sing psalms, and defy tyrants.